obviously you are the main man really when it comes to Three Peaks, I find. And honestly, like, it's an absolute honor to have you on talking to me. You are obviously a guy that I've looked up to for all my years racing cyclocross personally, and like on a personal level, it's a massive bit of a fanboy moment just talking to you, to be fair.
Oh,
So
that's really kind of you, Tom. That's so kind. I consider myself. I'm not really comfortable with that, and I like to be a little bit more modest. But
yeah.
I'm old enough to. If you ask me some questions about some stuff, I'll do the best I can to
Yeah.
tell you, and I might turn big-headed by the end of the podcast. So let's see what happens.
No, that's it. So but yeah, I've raced with you. I've raced against you many times in cross races when they kind of mix all the different age categories and stuff, and plenty of times you've absolutely dicked on me, and it's good to see that you're still giving the young lads a run for the money nowadays as well. But for though, I mean, obviously, I know a lot about you as a rider and as a person as well, a little bit about you. But for those who don't know, then, like, I mean, I appreciate a lot of my listeners will know. But before we start, give a little bit of a brief history of time, I guess. Give us a little bit of an insight into who Nick Craig is and what your kind of accomplishments are in the past.
Okay, so I was introduced to cyclocross when I was 9 by my dad. He basically had done cyclocross in a previous life before he had a family. And one of the things that he did was he won the third edition of the Three Peaks in 1963. So in 79-ish, he decided he was going to get back in cyclocross. We went to some local league races in the Northwest, and he decided he was going to do Three Peaks. So I was introduced to the Three Peaks really early in my career. Did I call that a career then? In my cycling. And yeah, it's from then on, I haven't missed the cross season. So there's a few years, I'm 53 now, so I'm not going to do the maths on that, but I've done a few cross seasons.
Yeah.
Some of them have been really short due to, let's say a surgery that needed to be done in the winter from a mountain bike season. And I was basically a cyclocross rider. I then did all the disciplines that were available. So I did a few time trials, which I didn't really enjoy, and don't miss them one bit. But what I did really enjoy was track racing and road racing. So
Yeah.
criterium. So as a youngster, that's what I did. But what a lot of people don't know about me and my cycling is a huge part of my history and love is cycle touring, and I'll call it that because I'm going to have to rephrase that. Bike packing, we call it
Right.
now.
Yeah.
And I used to ride around the Yorkshire Dales when I was 15, stay in youth hostels, camp, carry everything, and really that ultimately is my real passion in cycling. I was really lucky enough in the winter of '88. Good friend of mine, Rick Hammersley, who was a great mentor to me, suggested that we have a look at this sport of mountain biking. And we got a couple of Muddy Fox bikes, went out and rode around the local reservoir. I handed them back to the bike shop and said, no thanks. The guy in the bike shop said, I think it's the bikes. From everything you've said, I think it's the bikes that are the problem. So we got some nicer bikes, and that allowed me to replace the summer road racing with a much more friendly sport of mountain biking.
Yeah.
So the rest of it, I guess I was in the early years when Tim Gould and David Baker and Fred Salmon were riding for Peugeot. Before I knew it, I turned professional in 1991, and I was lucky enough to travel. I travelled with cyclocross before that to Europe, and for me, the biggest thing was to get travelling, get out there, and it was an opportunity. I'd never flown in my life before, and I was either on ferries, on flights, going to Italy, and I just couldn't
Wow.
believe that this, pedaling circles, and if I can do pedaling circles fast and smooth enough, that it'll take me to these great places, and that's the rest is kind of, you know.
So were you full time back then? Then were you doing any other work on the side, or was that full?
So from leaving school from 16 into the junior years, I managed to get twice second in the junior cross champs after winning the youth, or schoolboys it was called then, a trophy that my eldest son won, and Charlie came second in. So it's quite nice to sort of have that sort of history. But then I was working as a furniture maker and cabinet maker I did 5 years until I turned professional. So at the age of 20, nearly 21, I turned professional, and I've never worked a day in my life since. I don't think that I could call real work.
Yeah.
That's not true. My wife would kick me if she could hear me, because I do a lot of driving in my job, and I do a lot of talking, a lot of driving, a lot of technical support for Scott Sports. And you know, I'm just lucky enough that I love my job, so I don't really consider it work.
Yeah, I know what you mean there. I mean, a very different but similar position, I guess. You know, I work I love everything to do with cycling, and I work in the industry telling people how to ride the bikes faster, and like you say, it doesn't feel like work per se. So I know what you're saying there.
Yeah, I get asked a few times how many national champs I've won and that kind of thing, and I'm not being big-headed here. I actually don't know. I could check Wikipedia out, and it's definitely wrong. The ones I do remember, I remember the young ones because they were special. But when I was mountain biking and cyclocross and marathon racing, the sort of elite national champs was always a big thing to try and win. And you know, it was very competitive. Everyone wanted to win it. So when I finally won the cross country national champs in '97, it took me a few years to get there, but I managed to win that. That was the first one. And what's really funny is that it then took me 3 years to remuster the ability to win it again. And I won the cross country one 3 times, 3 years apart. I won the cyclocross elite national champs 3 times, 3 years apart, and I won the marathon. I think this a very similar sort of similar thing. So they're the kind of things that I did. I was lucky, you know, mountain biking for me in the 90s, the best I got to was plate number 5 after 4 rounds of the World Cup in America, Napa Valley, then into Europe, Budapest. I forget where else we raced that year. But to come to Plymouth and race round 5 in the UK in front of a home crowd with plate number 5 was a good feeling in 1998. And then, yeah, just carried on enjoying it. I officially retired from mountain biking in 2005 at the Leger Worlds.
Yeah.
At that point, there was a young lad called Nino Schurter, junior. Wow. Race. And yeah, I saw my old compatriot and racing colleague who we actually raced on the same frame set. So Thomas Frischneck raced on for Ritchie for a long time, and in the early days of 91, 92, we raced on Ritchie bikes sprayed to look like Peugeot, because Peugeot couldn't make a bike fit to race.
Yeah. And
we travelled a lot, and I got to know Thomas Frischneck well. So when I saw him in the 2005 World Champs in Leger, he had this amazing Scott scale frame. It was weighing under 1 kilo. At retirement, I was like, I need one of them. I really need one of them. And I ended up working for Scott, and I've been working for Scott for the last 16 years. And I've got to say, again, you know, when I say that I don't work for a living, it's because I get to, I'm very, very lucky to have the toys that I can only dream of, you know, a lot of people can only dream of owning. So I'm a lucky one.
Yeah, I must admit, I look at some of the Scott bikes, and like you say, I mean, growing up, they were always one of those brands that I respected, and then now, like, I mean, I'm at the point now where I know I need a new mountain bike, and I'm looking at the Spark, and I'm thinking, wow, that is absolutely top of the peak, and something that I want. And it's just at the minute trying to decide if it's how long I can save up and how long I can worthwhile going for one. Anyway, no, I mean, yeah, going down that line of what you were saying, like I know a fair amount of your top results, but I did a bit of a Google search and I was kind of pulling up Wikipedia, thinking I'm sure he's done different things to this, and I'm sure he's got a couple more than that, and so on. But yeah, I guess some of your biggest accomplishments in my eyes was a top 10 in the World Cup in '98, I believe. And obviously multiple national champ. What's quite cool is in both mountain bike on and the road as well. And obviously we can talk a little bit about the crossover there. Both of those are disciplines that I race, and I know that there's a lot of similarities between them, but there's also a lot of differences as well. With regards to that crossover then, did you find that your winter training did differ quite a lot to your summer training, or because obviously with the mountain bike season being a summer sport, cross season being winter, or did you do fairly similar stuff all year round?
No, I definitely switched it up a bit. One of the things that I had to be aware of is if to race cyclocross at an international level, I really would need to, a pure cross racer would start to race some small road stage races and mountain bike races in July and August, and they would kick the cross season off usually at the beginning of September, and they'd race right through to the end of February. As a mountain bike pro, that's not going to work because we need to be probably mid-February. I need to be on training camp for 2 or 3 weeks, warm weather training camp, building the engine for the summer, for the racing to start maybe back end of March into World Cup in April, May, June. And the World Championships didn't used to finish until the third. World Championships used to be the third weekend in September back in the 90s. So the cross season had already started. So it's impossible for me to, I needed a rest at the end of each season. I needed a break mentally, physically. So I would compress the cross season. If you ask me what is my ultimate, what's the best thing, best sport, best discipline in the whole of sport cycling, and I've got to say it's cyclocross, and that's because it's more competitive, and it's because you can race competitively in the UK on 6 to 8 hours a week training. And what that means is people that are working full time. I was lucky enough to be a pro, but I was racing some good riders that were full-time working. And, I work a full-time week now, and yet I know that if I can get it right, I can still race at a decent level in the UK. Totally respect that there's a huge step then into Europe and international. To do that, you need to be virtually full-time athlete. But it's the crossover from road to mountain bike is a really interesting one, because in my era, I needed to be able to, I needed to stretch my engine, because basically with mountain biking didn't used to be an hour and a half sport. It used to be 2:15 to 2:45 was target time.
Wow.
And we had World Cups that winning times were 3 hours 15. We had World Championships at 3. World Cup in Plymouth, 3 hours 15. And when you get those kind of race winning times, you could still be top 15 and you'd be 15 minutes behind. So you could be out there for 2.5 hours. Well, that's marathon. So we were racing marathon, and we also didn't have under 23 category. The day you turned 19, you were a senior. So it was hard. It was tough. And as a youngster, age 20, 21, 22, I found it really, really difficult. And what I needed to do was to stretch my, I was able to ride for about an hour 30, an hour 40 on the energy that your glycogen stores were full. And then they're gone. So the switch to fat burning wasn't happening with me. I was a cross racer, prick rider, and short distance up to an hour 45, and then I would blow up. So I decided one day that I'd do something about it. I was age 20, and I decided that I was going to go and ride. I've got a 74-mile loop from my house It goes through from Derbyshire to Cheshire to Staffordshire back to Derbyshire,
Right.
and it's if you look at the profile, it's not ridiculously up. It's not got massive hills in it, but there's nothing flat, and it was grippy, hard. And I decided what I'm going to do is I'm going to ride it 10 times instead of riding the local 30-mile loop or 40-mile loop. I'm going to ride this thing 8 days. I'm going to do it 8 times in 10 days. And that's what I did. And I basically did, I think I actually did 9 out of 10 days. And I basically made a small stage race for myself.
Yeah.
I had no one to ride with. I didn't care what the weather was doing. And I think I did 4 a day off, and then 4 or 5, or 5 and then a day off, then 4. And that reset my fat burning. Well, it didn't reset it. It taught my body to burn fat as a fuel. And I then went back into the racing, and I remember going to first round of national points. It was 3 hours long, and I beat David Baker, and that was, right. That's made a difference. So
yeah, they always, as a cross country mountain bike racer, I've only been in it for the last maybe 6-7 years, and obviously it's not changed too much over that time. But I've always heard from elder riders that it's typically becoming a lot shorter, a lot more aggressive. But to hear that it was like 3 hours plus winning times for some of the mountain bike racing, that's marathon territory. I mean, heaven forbid. I mean, to do the kind of intensity that I'm racing at the minute in a cross country race for 3 hours, impossible near enough. Very similar to you. I was kind of a bit of a petrol engine, and I'd be great over an hour and a half, and then after that it would really take its toll. I found that the main difference between cyclocross racing and mountain bike racing in terms of like a power profile was cross racing was often lots and lots of shorter, sharper accelerations, whereas mountain bike racing often was kind of longer, more sustained efforts, which were typically a little bit more into the red, but then coupled that with slightly longer recoveries when you're on a descent. But then those descents, obviously, you can't completely recover because you're manipulating the bike, you're pumping through rocks and roots and so on, and you've got to be mentally switched on. So I would assume as well, obviously, there was a big crossover for you to naturally just start riding your mountain bike more for the summer season as well.
Yeah, so one of the big differences in the early days was the bike. So we used to ride full rigid, alloy frames, then suspension came along. What used to happen is you used to race, and I can remember I'd finish a race, I wouldn't be able to put my socks on because I was so beaten up. I couldn't reach my feet. I would be so beaten up on a Monday, I'd have to wait till Tuesday night before I could ride. And the last thing I wanted to ride was a mountain bike. So I'd go on a road bike, I'd go out on the flat, I'd roll my legs around, I'd teach the system to work. Really, training was really difficult. And I found sometimes the only training I managed some weeks between big races was a Wednesday. Ideally, I'd loved it to have been Tuesday chain gang, Wednesday 3 hours, Thursday chain gang, recover Monday, taper Friday, pre-race ride Saturday.
Yeah.
Bang. And if you go into 5 World Cups back to back to back to back, we even used to have to qualify on a Saturday, and the whole time was about recovery. So when we went into World Cup number 1, you needed to be so fit, so ready, so fresh that you had to try and carry your form without really training. So the racing was your best training. And you didn't recover. What happened then is in the early 2000s, bikes got better. So full suspension came. I remember winning the national points race it was what became just before the Spa. We had a Genius RC, which was racing concept. I think it was about 120, 30 mil travel. And I can remember riding at Thetford Forest, which isn't my kind of course. It's pan flat, bumpy, not my thing. And I remember the difference. I could sit on a wheel and I was listening to the suspension, taking all of that. I wasn't having to lift myself out the saddle. I wasn't having to use muscles. And I didn't have to sit on the front all the time. So I could sit behind people. And on the last lap, I just tore off. And I was like, that day I didn't win. The full suspension bike won.
Yeah.
That's really accelerated now. And you look at the sports change for the good, like 2012, the likes of Simon Burney really helped with if the TV at the Olympics. I was lucky enough to race the Olympics in the early days, so I raced in 2000, and it was a 2.5 hour race. When you look at 2012, it was 1 hour 30 minutes. There were no crowds covering the TV, the rock gardens at Hadley, the little flags, the detail, and it's literally changed the sport to today. So 10 years on, the sport's at this amazing place because of that change. And I think if that hadn't happened, the sport of mountain bike cross country would have died. So we're in a great place. It's really exciting. But these bikes just keep coming, you know, to think we're racing 120 mil. It was probably 100 mil actually, that Genius. I can't quite remember now, but it was really a trail bike that we were trying to race on. And now we're fully into this new 120 mil travel bike. And you know, I rode the Ardrock Enduro last weekend on my cross country race bike.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And it's mad to think. I mean, it blows my mind to think what might be happening in the next 20, 30, 40 years as well. Like, you know, you look at the current technology and it's amazing to see what they're doing with bikes, but then also, you know, how on earth can that be bettered? And every year I think, you know, how can it possibly get any better than what it is now? And then every 3 or 4 years something else comes out and you're like, wow, that's I mean, I'm currently on like a 100 and I'm on a hardtail 29er, like boost travel boost bike, and like I'm at that stage now where I know that I need to transfer to a full suspension bike. But then, as you just said, like, you know, if I was to go back 50 years, because I feel like I'm being shaken to bits on a hardtail sometimes, and there's certain courses which might still favor the hardtail, but in general it's more full suspension, which is a benefit now. And I still feel like I'm being shaken to bits in certain trails. So I dread to think what it was like 50 years ago on the kind of you know, the old bikes you used to race. But Nick, I could talk to you at length about mountain bike racing, cross racing, and loads of different stuff about what you've done and your life and everything. But what I want to do is kind of drill it down a little bit to what this podcast was initially made for, which is more to do with the Three Peaks. So before we go into it as a subject area and about telling us what the race is and so on, Three Peaks results and accomplishments. Am I right in saying you are 3 times winner of the race?
Yeah, that's right. So
I was looking back as well. I mean, obviously you got many top 5 finishes as well. So 2009 you won the race in under 3 hours, 2 hours 54 minutes. You got in 2008 you had a second place in about 3 hours. You've had many attempts at it, which have all been about that 3 hour mark. Where does Three Peaks kind of fit into your racing calendar, and how much do you I guess in the last 10 years or so, how much have you kind of used it as a target? Do you use it a target, or is it kind of one of those events that you kind of just going through the motions with?
I don't target it anymore. It was something I was. You used to be. You have to be 17 to race it now. You have to be. I'm pretty confident saying you have to be a second year junior to race the Three Peaks. I raced it when I was 16.
Right. Wow.
I raced it for 5 years till I won it, and I was kind of determined that I wanted to win it. My teammate Fred Salmon has won it 3 times, so I was riding like he's very local to me. I went to school with him, and obviously Tim Gould was the record holder, like at 7 wins or something. So I was kind of, and Simon Burney, I've already mentioned, was very fond of the event himself, and it kind of, with that sort of growing up as a youngster, seeing the likes of Eric Stone and John North, winning the race, and I was just inspired and looked up to the winners of the Three Peaks and thought, what a great thing, what a good thing it would be to win it one day. Obviously, with my dad winning it as well, it was kind of something I really wanted to try and win. So the first few years, I just rode it. I remember riding it one year just on a road bike. We used to clatter around it, and we just got around it. What's interesting now is the modern day Three Peaks is a different kind of. It's changed. You used to come off the tracks, and then you used to have to climb in and out of peat bogs, and it was definitely harder. There's no doubt about it. You only have to look at the winning times. The winning times are quite similar. I think the winning times in the 70s, 80s were probably 3 hours 15, but it was considerably shorter.
Oh, right.
It was more direct, and it used to go straight up, straight down, straight up, straight down, and that was climbing in and out of peat bogs. It was nuts, really. In those early years, up until the sort of when I was 19, 20, one year I remember going to Spain on holiday with a load of mates, drinking lots of beer, and thought that the odd jog down the beach might do the trick. And I had a great suntan that year. All I had to do was look down at my tan lines, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm good. I was far from it. Probably the worst. If I knew the actual results of all my Three Peaks over the years, that would have been the worst one. And from then on, I remember my dad was still racing it, and I remember one year there was like a handing over of the gauntlet. Could I say Pen y Ghent, and I remember it was a really nasty day. It was horrible and cold. I was on my way down Pen y Ghent, and I'd beaten my dad basically, and it was really cold. And I took I had a full waterproof, windproof cape on, and I remember handing it to him and whatever I'd left in my pockets, and that was kind of So to then finally win it, I turned professional. Simon Burney turned me professional for Peugeot in 1991, and we raced all that year. I found that year really difficult physically. I was trying to adjust to the professional life and not working, and doing too much training maybe for a youngster, just without really the right guidance. I used to just ride my bike because I had time. Overdid it a bit. And I remember Simon, he just said to me, I know you've been picked for the mountain bike world champs, downhill and cross country in El Choco in 91, but the week before it, I want you to win the Three Peaks.
Right.
So I always considered, when I turned professional, I did a job. And when your boss says, I need you to do something, for me, that was just like somebody saying, can you make me a cabinet with 6 drawers? Can you dovetail that job of it? So off I went. That meant my wife, Sarah, she wasn't my wife then. We went and recce'd the course, which you're not allowed to do now.
No, I've heard, yeah.
Yeah, it was okay. So we went to Dent, we camped, the weather was awful. We walked where you weren't allowed to ride. We rode where you were allowed to ride, or I did. And I basically recce'd it. And I was determined to win it. And I managed to win it after 5 years. What's interesting then, I was 21. I then didn't race the Three Peaks for 10 years because once I did it, I sighed this huge sigh of relief.
Yeah.
I was like, right, I've won it. I can relax.
Yeah.
And because the Three Peaks always came 1 week after the mountain bike world champs, that was a big focus. And there was just, to carry it, to prep for Three Peaks or even think about Three Peaks, all I wanted to do was go on holiday and relax. And that's what happened. So I left it for 10 years. 2002, sort of towards the latter part of my mountain bike career, I was just, I just thought, I'm going to go back and have a go at this. And it was suggested by a good friend of mine, Fred Salmon, said, come on, let's have this. Because there was this guy, Rob Jebb, about to take Tim Gould's record off him. And there was a whole load of hilarious banter between the fell running fraternity and a couple of my mates. And a couple of my mates, Fred Salmon and Neil Coverley particularly, started winding up the fell runners, saying that Rob Jebb basically has no chance of winning the Three Peaks because this mountain bike pro Nick Craig's just going to kick his ass. And I just, I laughed and laughed at this. And there was some. I don't know how I don't know if I can share this with you, but they decided one of the comments. I'll tell you. This is not it's not going out to under 14s, is it? Of course it is.
No, not particularly.
All right. Well, let's go for it.
Go for it.
So what they did was all these fell runners started to on the forum started saying Nick Craig's got no chance. They started a war between we're friends. Yeah, they started this war, and it's hilarious because Fred Salmon then turned around and said, if Rob Jebb beats Nick Craig, I'll show my arse at Ribblehead Viaduct. So what happened is Neil Coverley, who's got a really good DLSR camera, Fred and him went to Three Peaks for a ride. Fred dropped his trousers, bent over in the arches of Ribblehead Viaduct. Neil took a great photograph, and the rest is history. Went back to the first Three Peaks, and I was pretty close to Jebby. I definitely shook him up.
Yeah.
But he beat me.
Yeah.
And he beat me. I think I had 3 or 4 punches because he ran down things that I would try and ride down. I punched a few times. I was probably a minute and a half behind him in the end. I got beat. That night, the photo got uploaded, and Neil and Fred are quite clever. They loaded it at about 11:30 at night, knowing the administrator had probably gone to bed. And that photo sat on the Three Peaks site overnight until the administrator got up and removed it the next day.
So, I mean, it's one of the questions that at the end of this podcast, I've got like about 12 questions that have been asked. When a lot of my listeners and followers knew that you were on the podcast today, there was a lot of specific questions for you. But one of the questions that was asked, and I'll ask it now, is do you personally think that Three Peaks is one more on the running and the off the bike carrying elements to the race, or on the technical riding and the road sections? Do you think one is more important than the other, or are they both equally balanced?
I think that the modern day Three Peaks, which I'm going to say is now like a gravel race with some walking. Now, everyone talks about running. Did you say running then?
I did mention running, yeah.
So
it's more of a walk, is it?
Yeah. I would say that Rob Jebb can run and a fell runner can run, and they do run, and I don't run.
Right.
I just walk. You can win the Three Peaks without running anywhere. It plays into the fell runners. If it's muddy and rainy, if it's been raining and you get into the lower slopes of Simon Fell, and you have to get off because you can't get grip and you start to get a gradual incline. That's where you need to run, and that's the only place to run.
I see.
Ideally, if I can get to the foot of Simon Fell with Rob Jebb, I could go toe to toe with him. I'm not a fell runner. I've done some fell running, but I'm not a fell runner. The physicality, the quad muscle, walking up Simon Fell, if you walk in, and I don't think Jebby can even run up that bit, is very similar to the cycling muscle group. So it's very, very similar. And I do think a lot of it's won. I usually lose minutes to Jebby up there overall from the bottom to the top. And that's where you'd lose the most time as a cyclist to maybe.
Interesting. Yeah.
What is... Yeah, go on.
Sorry, go on.
After you.
No, I was gonna change the topic. So if you did have something to finish off with there. No,
it will. I'm sure we'll come. You're going to ask me what Simon Fell's like, so I'll
yeah. I've kind of missed something quite significant, and I think that most people that are tuning into this podcast will know exactly what Three Peaks is. I've personally never done the race, purely because I don't think it's the type of thing that I would typically do well at or enjoy. I much prefer shorter, sharper racing like cross racing and so on. But to you, as like a summary, what is Three Peaks?
It's something. What is it to me personally? Like, what does it mean to me, or what is it
to the unknown person who's tuning into this podcast, has actually maybe never heard of the race before? Maybe they've done a few cross races. They're just starting out, and they've heard of Three Peaks, but they don't have no idea what it is. A bit of a summary of what the race is.
Yeah, so it's nothing like a cyclocross race. It's very, very old. It's 1961 was the first edition, and it basically you basically carry your bike over three peaks in which are Ingleborough, Whernside, and Pen y Ghent. It's a very, very, very well known walk of about 25 miles. The bike route is different because it needs, it has to be for land ownership and the rights of way, that kind of thing. It's a special, it's a one-off. It really is a one-off. Could you call it a gravel race? I suppose you could, but it's just become this iconic event that the only thing I'd say is when you finish it, you swear. If you did it, Tom, you'd say to me afterwards, I'm never doing that
Never
again.
doing it again. Yeah.
I guarantee you within 10, 12, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, you'll be going, I'm having that. I'm going to train for that. And, the term I was asked in 2019, World Tour Pro, Lachlan Morton from EF Education.
Yeah.
In the January, February, I didn't really know who Lachlan was. I've not really followed that kind of, I wasn't really aware of him. He was a 27-year-old World Tour Pro that's won stages in Tour of California, the Rockies Tour, rides a Giro, a super engine. Can he win the Three Peaks? And I was asked that question on Twitter, and I literally had to say, I don't care who he is or how good he is. I believe you have to do one to win one, is what I said back in the January. I did say I might eat my words. If Van der Poel or Tom Pidcock turned up, I think it may be different. Any one of those two could probably just belt round and win it. I'm sure they could. We all probably know that. And it's really interesting because he did come in 2019. He did ask me to do me and Paul Oldham to do an interview with the Rafa TV. They were doing a video of it for their for the YouTube channel, and it was brilliant because I told him what he needed to do, and he didn't listen. And he actually did it on his Instagram story, and it's hilarious because he said some 50-year-old guy, me, told him what to do, and he said he didn't listen, then kicked his ass. And what he did was he went up Simon Fell, and I said to him, whatever you do not, I don't care how high altitude you live at. He'd been in Colorado, he trained for it to the best of his knowledge. He rides 40 hours a week on his bike, World Tour Pro. He went up Simon Fell and went toe to toe and tried to run with Rob Jebb, and his heart rate hit 185. And you're a coach, that a World Tour Pro hitting 185s, deep in the red.
Yeah, definitely.
I was 6th or 7th going up Simon Fell. I caught him as it levels off, and there's a transition then to the top of Ingleborough, and I caught him. I asked him if he was okay. I told him to get on my wheel and follow me because there was a really nice stealth line that I learnt from the fell running Jebb fraternity a few years earlier. I was actually following the trail and dropping down and coming back up. They carve around the contour, which is really nice. And he couldn't hold my wheel, and I didn't see him again.
Wow. Because he'd gone too deep up that climb and never be able to recover.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the main thing that he lost there was what he did by losing me over the top of there. He then lost the guide to take him down Ingleborough.
Yeah.
And we'll have done that with some riders further back that maybe weren't quite so akin with how to ride down Ingleborough and not punch your tyres and stay upright. And so it was really interesting. And what I told him was, Whernside is still a big, a lot of walking, a lot of carrying. But when you get to Pen y Ghent, it's a bike rider's climb. And if you're within a minute and a half, 2 minutes of striking distance of winning it, you can win it from there. Because when you go up Pennygent Lane and up Pennygent, there's less walking, less running, and it's definitely a bike rider's climb. He actually went from 4th to 11th. So, sorry, 11th. He was 11th and he got to 4th.
Yeah, because I was going to ask you about the 3 climbs. And I mean, again, a little bit of research just off the Three Peaks website. It suggests that of the 38 miles, it suggests that 34 miles is rideable. 20 miles is off-road and 18 miles is road. Does that sound about right to you? I feel like
it doesn't sound right. But
no.
Yeah. Say that again. Say it
slowly. So I'm sure I got this off the Three Peaks website, but it suggests that the course is about 38 miles.
Yeah. That's right.
And it suggests that 34 miles is rideable.
Yeah, that probably is true. Yeah.
I guess it depends. A lot of it depends on the conditions, obviously.
Yeah.
And it suggests that 20 miles of the full course is off-road.
Yeah.
And then the 18 miles is road.
Yeah. And if you look at the profile, how many is it? Like 1,000 feet up the first one, 1,500 feet second one, don't know the third one. You could look at that on paper. You're in America.
Yeah. Easy. Yeah.
So you look at that and go, I can do that.
Yeah.
It's not that hard. It's not that hard. It's not what it is on paper.
No. And what worries me, one of my apprehensions, I guess, if I did end up entering the race is, and I don't know each climb, each berg, when you're in the red and you've got that racing mindset and you're trying to descend as quick as you possibly can, it's that situation which presents itself where you might be descending down a hill and there's certain obstacles, so we say, that suddenly present themselves that you've got to bunny hop over, or you've got to change your line round, or there's little bogs and wet patches that can suck your front wheel in, and often you might not see them in time. And you I mean, there's been many stories of bad crashes on some of the descents and things like that. And especially because I live in East Yorkshire, and where I live, there's nothing that replicates anything like Three Peaks. So it's quite hard to train in that environment. Now, obviously, depending on where people live, such as obviously you're in a privileged position in that you've got very similar kind of stuff where you live, and you can ride those kind of environments quite often. But I guess, is there any tips you would give on, trying to train for those kind of descents? Is it just a case of getting out in your car and getting to those kind of environments, or?
I'll give you a really good example. You are right. I am privileged to live in Hayfield, and that I can ride a cross bike, a nice little warm up, about 1.5 miles, and then I can walk 15 minutes up what is as steep as Simon Fell. And when we say steep as Simon Fell, anyone that's done any research or seen it, or anyone that is listening that hasn't done it, if you imagine pulling the grass with you've got your bike on your right shoulder if you're right-handed, and you pull in the grass with your left hand, that's how steep it is.
Wow.
Your calves are screaming.
Yeah.
So if you do one thing between now and the last Sunday in September, you need to stretch your calves. To not rip them, but you need to stretch them, so that, and the best way to do that is, at least once a week, find somewhere where you can walk, where you really are walking steep. A really good friend of mine, Stu Bowers, he's done various jobs. He's in marketing Northern Europe for SRAM now, but he was at the time he said, I'm going to come do the Three Peaks, he was working at Cycling Weekly in Croydon on the 11th floor of the tower block. And he stopped using the lift and he walked upstairs, and He finished fourth, I think, in the peaks that year.
Fair. Yeah.
So there, yes, the one of the main differences from a physical point of view is trying to work out a rough idea how long the peaks is going to take. You told me how long it takes me, so I need to be able to go and ride a good solid 3 hours at a good rate, and that rate's not in the red. That's sub max, constant effort for 3 hours. If it's somebody else, they may take 4.5 hours, and they can probably work that out as to where they are fitness wise. So that person needs to be able to train for a 4.5 hour effort, and through your coaching, you're the guy that knows how to tell them how to do that, to condition themselves to. You're not going to do that on carbohydrate, so condition the body as best they can. But what I've found in recent years for me is if I do a few marathons, I'm doing marathon mountain bike champs next week in Kielder Forest. I'll do the MTB marathon in Ruthin on the 10th of September. I'll do I'll slide in a few 3-4 hour rides, and I'll go and do these 3 or 4 hour rides. I enjoy riding my bike, so doing a long, slower ride is really what I enjoy doing. So I will make sure I remind my body what's coming. And because those peak bogs that we climb in and out of that I talked about in the early days, they don't exist anymore. So pretty much once you've come off Ingleborough, you can ride from. If you ask, you're going to ask me about tyres at some point, or shall I tell you now?
I certainly am. I'm definitely discussing equipment at some point. Yeah,
we'll save that then. What I say is, you're doing some gravel. You are riding on gravel. It's rideable, and I don't feel that there's a massive amount of particular specific training needed, other than walk. If there's one thing you can do, walk up a mountain. Find a good hill, walk up it. If you've only got a 5-minute hill, walk up it, ride down it. So your original question was, how do you learn to keep pulling that front wheel out of a bog or a ditch or a log or some rock that's got in the way? Do that. Walk up, ride down, walk up, ride down. And we're talking about where you would only normally ride down on a mountain bike with 150 mil travel. You're on the wrong bike. It's wrong. It's never going to be right, and it's never going to feel right. Your shoulders ache, your arms ache, your body aches, but at least condition your body to what to expect.
Yeah, I think it's funny. I've got maybe, I'm trying to think. I've got about 5 clients who are doing the 3 peaks, and each of them presents themselves with very different scenarios coming into it. So, for example, some of them have been racing summer cyclocross, some of them have been racing mountain bike marathons all year, but most of them are in very good aerobic condition, and most of them I'm not too concerned about their ability to withstand the effort for that duration. But when we have that conversation on how we're going to make their training specific, I think some of them who haven't done the race before, they were waiting for an answer, which is a lot to do with specific efforts that they can do on a road ride, or specific efforts that they can do on the turbo, or whatever it might be. But in reality, when we talk about 3 peak specific training, for example, one of my clients lives near Otley, and we've been doing reps of Chevin steps, and maximal efforts of that, and sub-maximal efforts of that. But then also, as well as you just suggested, the difference between walking or running up steps compared to walking or running up a incredibly steep hill where you have to put your hand up. There's a lot of different stresses on the lower limb and the calves and things like that, which need to be replicated as best possible as well. So we've also been doing certain sessions where I've been asking them to find the steepest hill they can find off road, and simply, just walking up it with the shoulder on the back as many times as they can.
So there's 2 flights of steps down in 3 peaks. There's the famous one is you go up Whernside, the second one. Well, actually, there's 3. The steps towards the end. There's a few steps towards the end of Ingleborough, not many. And this is erosion control that changes the course year on year on year. It becomes more sanitized. There's a flight of steps. You go on to Whernside, which is the second one, and you get halfway up it, and there's this flight of steps, and I lift my head up, and Rob Jebb or somebody, usually Rob Jebb, is actually running up those steps. And there aren't many that can run up those steps. And I wouldn't suggest that any one of your clients tries to run up the steps. All these maximal efforts, all they need to do is power walk.
Yeah.
You can put your left, if you're right-handed, your bike's on your right shoulder, you've got a left hand free, you can put that left hand on you just above your knee and push on it like a fell runner would do. Power walk, power walk. And then when you get up there, you can get on your bike and ride the final bit. And ride as much on the low slopes as you can. So with the gearing that we'll talk about later, use the gearing and stay on your bike as long as you can, but be ready to get off it. Do you pick it up? Do you push it? It depends. Like I would push, if the ground's smooth and I can push a bike, why would I put it on my back?
Yeah.
If the ground's, if I'm picking a lot of dirt up or I'm on steps, then I'm going to pick it up. So it's those kind of things. It's just transitioning between those things. One of the biggest challenges is then coming down to a descent and making the decision when to get off. Because as a mountain bike head, Rob Jebb got off and started running. He just runs down, so he doesn't punch you like you do. I risk puncturing by riding down things, but I also don't want to run down them because that's like a negative. I don't run downhill. So I think one of the, that flight of steps are really, we're talking about you're only going to spend 7 or 8 minutes on those steps, 10 minutes at the most. But on the very final one, on Pen y Ghent now, there's we used to, up until 2019, we used to just go up the Peak Bog at the finish, but they now take you around, and there's a flight of steps. They're probably not as steep or as hard as the ones on the second one on Whernside, but when you get to Pen y Ghent, there's something about that flight of steps. It's at the point in the race where it's your last, you think it's your last effort. I'll tell you, there's another effort to go. But those flight steps are a mind game. You literally just need to get one foot in front of the other and survive into those steps.
So in your opinion, of the 3 peaks, which would you call the hardest of the peaks?
Probably the first one, Simon Fell, will be the biggest shock. So when you get to the top of Simon Fell, I've many times thought, I can't do this. Calves are screaming. They feel like they've been torn to pieces. But all I say to you at that point is, at that moment, get on your bike, get into a nice low gear and just pedal those calves out. And I promise you, when you get to the same point on Whernside, which is number 2, your calves have been stretched beyond, and you won't feel them again. So that's probably the top of Simon Fell is probably one of the hardest points, and surviving, having the energy on the riding to get to Houghton and Ribblesdale to start the final ascent to Pen y Ghent with energy. So you can do all the training you like, but you've now just put your body through. At this point, you've put your body through something that it's not really used to. You've not felt it, and you kind of set off up Pen y Ghent Lane, and it's riding. You're doing what you should be good at, and it's whether at that point whether you've still got the energy to do this. And it's hard. It really is hard. And what Pen y Ghent does, you go up Pen y Ghent Lane, it's not too bad. You turn right, it's not too bad. And then you dare to lift your head and look up, and you can see people there's a right-hand turn where you start to traverse the final part, and it just goes like a ramp where it gets steeper and steeper and steeper. And I try to ride as far as I can using the low gears that we'll talk about, but it just gets, even for me with those low gears, it doesn't matter how low your gearing is, you have to have the skills to balance to be able to keep riding, or else you can't do it. And physically, you usually at that point, it don't care whether you're Rob Jebb or whether you're whether you're doing it if you're doing it in 5 hours, 6 hours, it hurts at that point. Everything hurts. So it's a tough one.
One query that's kind of come up in my mind when I'm listening to what you're talking about now is with regards to nutrition and fueling the race. Now, obviously, even if you're doing it in 3 hours, you will have to take on some sort of nutrition in the race and to fuel the effort. But for the average finish time, which will be considerably more than 3 hours, there's even more of a reason why you need to be taking on fuel. But there's an obvious situation which is presenting itself, which is often, when you're descending these incredibly technical descents, or when you're running, it is quite hard to take on food. So, apart from the obvious, which is try and take on the food on the roads, which might not necessarily timing wise be exactly where you need to be taking it on anyway. Is there anything else that you would give advice wise in terms of a fueling strategy for the race, or key times when it is a good time to take stuff?
Well, obviously the first thing is to arrive at the event hydrated, and that's so easy to get wrong. So, overhydrated, not only drinking water, making sure that your body's grabbed hold of the fluid and holding the fluid. If you start this race a bit heavy, like a little a camel, it doesn't really matter.
No.
You just need to make sure that you're fully fueled. So making sure that you've eaten, am I right in saying carbs hold water? So you've carbo loaded, you've held water, you've tapered for a few days for this event. From the Wednesday onwards, there's nothing to do. You're not going to go and walk up a mountain on Wednesday right before 3 weeks. You might be better just doing some stretching in your living room. You've obviously travel to the event. Make sure you're hydrated. Wake up, hydrate. Start the race hydrated. Then one of the key things is when you look at your bike, there's only one place to put your bottle in the Three Peaks, and that's seat tube mounted bottle cage. So some people would use a Camelback, but you wouldn't ever see me using a Camelback. So I would start with a full bottle, and I would even consider drinking a good portion of that bottle in the get through the neutralised bit, which is through Horton and Ribblesdale, maybe 1.5 miles, 2 miles. Don't be drinking there. Stay completely alert. It's tetchy, it's nervous. And then we get through Horton, the neutralised car will drive away, and at that point it goes uphill. So you're not drinking anything. There's a couple of little ups and downs, and you could have a really good mouthful before you turn off the road. You'd then turn onto a farm track, and on that farm track it climbs to start with. You go over the cattle grid, climbs up, there'll be a little crowd. You could have a drink there, and then you're literally going to start Simon Fell. You ride through some fields to start with. These fields are quite flat. So it's really weird. You're so focused on getting on with the race that you don't really want to be thinking about drinking. And I think the next chance you've got to drink is at the top of Simon Fell, when your car's in, you jump on your bike. It's a bit technical. You stop and get over a stile. It's called Rawnsley Stile, after the great John Rawnsley that instigated first, the organizer for years. He won the first event, sadly passed away a few years ago. And you go over the stile, and I can't even think where your next drink is. So you may only need half a bottle for that start, but I would have one on there and just get a few sips if you can. The only other thing you can do is when you're walking up Simon Fell, you could actually, as you get off your bike, you could take your bottle off and have a drink while you're walking.
So would you tend to have, personally, carbohydrate solution in that bottle?
Yeah, I would definitely just have a sort of standard. I use Torque Energy, so I just have their standard 2 scoops, and I would definitely have energy in the bottle.
So from the start to the top of Simon Fell, how long does that take you roughly?
40 minutes.
Okay, yeah. So what we know about in terms of how quickly we get through carbohydrates is that typically at that kind of intensity, within an hour, you're looking at about 60 grams of carbohydrates. So everyone's massively different. Some will be substantially more than that. Some will be substantially less than that. But yeah, something for listeners to consider is that by the time you get to an hour, So let's say that on average, most people might take about an hour or just after to get to the top of there. If you're going to have a strong latter end to the race, then you could have all ideally, obviously you're going to be going to the race well fueled, but you need to be in a position where you've kind of kept up with that demand of carbohydrate, and you've had, depending on what brand, you've got through a good half bottle of mix. A lot of people might have already had a gel, like as they were walking at the top of Simon Fell, for example, as well. And we won't go off into that tangent too much because there's a lot of individual differences. But yeah, do you personally take any energy gels on the ride as well?
I definitely have energy gels in my pocket, but I wouldn't have even gone near my pockets before I get to the road section after Ingleborough. But that, like you say, that's a bit easier for me because I've got a rough idea how long that's going to take.
Yeah.
And when I think about it, that bottle that I started with, it'll be a 600 ml bottle. I've probably drank a third of it on the start line.
That's true.
Already. The best thing to do is not worry about that nervous road section because you're not going to touch it. To have already sank what I need in that first bit anyway. So I will force a 500 ml bottle into me before the top of Ingleborough.
Yeah.
I know that'll pay later in the race. And a lot of people are doing that. So I think that's probably a tip from me. That's what I would do.
Yeah, absolutely.
When I descend Ingleborough, and at that point there, I'm going to definitely get a new bottle. So bottle number 2 is at the foot of Ingleborough, and we get onto the road, and it's a perfect downward slope and a great place to start hydration. And that bottle between there and Chapel of Dale, which is the start of Whernside, you definitely need that second bottle. That's an absolute must.
So do you tend to, I know it's not going to be possible for everybody, but in terms of help and support, then, you're talking about different bottles, getting through a bottle after the first climb and so on. What happens in terms of picking up other bottles? Do you have to rely on your own support, or is there a table that you can stash with stuff there for people who don't have access to people? Or
not there's a table at the foot of Whernside, if I remember, and there's cups of water on there, really. So it's literally, you could stop and drink as much as you like, I'm sure. But I never do because I've obviously got support. So my wife's doing the support. I would come off Ingleborough. I've always tried to race the 3 peaks on one bike. But in recent years, I've made the choice to ride over Ingleborough on a tyre with some grip. And then I've decided to race from Ingleborough on a tyre with almost no grip. So like a file tread. So what that means is when I come down off Ingleborough, if you have 2 bikes, and if you're going to adopt my strategy, which I think is quite a good one, regardless, if weather conditions are completely bone dry, you could definitely do the file like a G1 Schwalbe for the whole thing.
Yeah.
But usually the first one over Ingleborough, you may need some grip in places if it's rained at all. So I would go for grip. And the one benefit of that is what I learned over the latter years is that descending Ingleborough, there's a lot of hidden rocks in the ground, and it's so easy to smack and puncture. But if I know that my wife or your helper is at the bottom of the first one at the the dipper point, and my bike's there with the G1s, the file treads, and the bottle already preloaded on the bike, I can actually ride that descent in a slightly different mindset. I can take a few risks, and I'm just going to swap. So in the early years of me coming back to the race, I got down there with 2 flat tyres, stopped and swapped 2 wheels, while Jebby's already 3 minutes in front and he's now 5 minutes in front. Then I'd catch him back up, and it kind of play a yo-yo game. So what I think now is that second bottle. So if you haven't got a second bike for 3 peaks, what I would recommend is that your helper has got a pair of wheels and a bottle. You must get that bottle off them. You need to hand over your bottle, take your new bottle. You're going to need it. So take your bottle, and then get on the road and start fueling. I probably overdo it. I then have somebody at Chapel of Dale with another bottle, and I find that one quite hard to drink on Whernside. But when I get to the top of those steps and I'm on the final run up to the top of Whernside, for me to hydrate before I'm going to spend 15 minutes descending is the best thing.
Yeah.
So I will attempt to get a good portion of that bottle in as well. So I've done one bottle at the start. I've done 2 bottles going to Chapel of Dale. I'll do a bottle over Whernside, and then I'm going to do exactly the same at Ribblehead Viaduct. I'm going to get a bottle handed up to me because I'm going to stay on that bike. So that's bottle number 4.
Wow. Yeah.
And I'll do that on the way to Horton and Ribblesdale. How do I know I'm hydrated enough at that point? Bearing in mind that every one of these has got energy in there.
Yeah.
I'm not needing a lot of solid fuel.
No.
I might have a gel at some point, but I'm not really needing it because I've gone liquid. I've gone carbohydrates in liquid. The last time I rode the race, I was with a great guy from Wheelbase, Dave, up from Dave Murfield, and he's a big guy. He doesn't look like a Three Peaks. Certainly doesn't look like a runner. He's a great cross rider, great road rider, and he's just an engine. And I was lucky enough to spend that road section with him, and we talked, worked together, and rode. Rob Jebb was off the front, and we were in 2nd and 3rd place. There's a small road descent down into Horton and Ribblesdale, and I asked one thing of him, and I was, this is how hydrated I was. I was bursting for a pee.
Need a slash. Yeah.
So I warned him. I just said, I'm just going to sit behind you on this roll. Before, I wouldn't want to do this in the town, in the village of Horton and Ribblesdale. So I emptied the tank. I wished him luck and said, I hope we can hang on to a podium because Lachlan Morton can't be far behind. He's got to be coming, surely. And, that then I would hit Pennygent Lane. And this is my full-on feeding strategy. And my wife's parents would be 3rd. Pennygent Lane, if you've never been up, it goes up in little steps. It has flat bits where it goes slightly down and up. Go up the 3rd or 4th step, and there's a long straight. And I always used to take a bottle of, being whatever sponsored bottle I am, whatever product I'm using, but it'd have a can of Coke in there, and it would be topped up with water, 5 ml. And that's all I needed to get over. Cleaned the mouth out and gave me that little sugar hit that I needed.
Absolutely. When you said you don't take any gels, I was a bit shocked. But to be fair, considering how much fluid you take on, it makes perfect sense now because you've got, considering the amount of bottles you take on, you've kind of matched that carbohydrate demand. And for someone like you who's doing it in about 3 hours, and you are metabolically much more efficient than a lot of people, you won't be burning through quite as much. You don't have to rely on as many gels and so on. But like you say, having a couple of like backup gels on your person just in case you need them is always a good strategy to have.
I'll have in my pocket. I've definitely got a couple of soft bars that are chewy and easy to eat, and I might just have half of one on one of the road sections. I might slide a gel in just before Pennygent Lane as well. And this year, for the first time, there's a cola caffeinated drink available. So this year instead of the can of Coke, so I will be trying that out.
All right.
But that's my feeding strategy. I don't know anyone that's ever finished the Three Peaks and not cramped.
No.
In World Tour Pro or Rob Jebb, they'll all tell you. What's really funny with Three Peaks is everyone talks about Three Peaks. Ingleborough, Whernside, Pennygent. You've done it. You've nailed it. You get yourself down Pennygent Lane without hitting anyone. You've survived it. You hit the road at the bottom, and all you've got to do is ride maybe 1.5 miles, 2 miles back to the Helworth Bridge.
Yeah.
And you'll ride along there, and you think the elation starts to come that you're nearly there. You turn the corner of this long sweeping bend, and there it is, the cold coats. I think it's cold coat. Well, let's call it the Calder Helworth Bridge, and it's only a few meters. You'll cramp, and it's the fourth peak in the three peaks. It's nasty.
Yeah.
Drag yourself up that fourth
Wow.
peak, and you'll be cramping. Everyone cramps up there. It's awful.
Really.
But then top of there, you know.
I mean, on paper, the Three Peaks presents itself as a perfect environment for cramping, because what we know, like, cramping itself is something that science can't fully understand yet. There's a lot of misinformation out there in terms of exactly what it is. But what we do know is that cramping is most often coming about in an environment where the muscle is just under undue stress, something that it's not used to. And with Three Peaks, it gives not only a lot of intensity over an extended period of time, not only usually an imbalance in salts in the muscle, which don't help, but also putting the muscles into a stress that they're not used to. So, for example, climbing up very steep hills, which people haven't done before. But not only that, but it's the descending on the climbs where you're holding your calves and your hamstrings in that half flexed position. Like, the amount of times I've got cramp in my calf when I'm just descending, holding that kind of half flexed position. It's a very it's an environment that's very common for cramping, for sure. Let's move swiftly on to, because I'm mindful of time. Let's move swiftly on to equipment then. We've talked a little bit about it already, but in a little bit more specifics. If I was to ask you, Nick, if money was no object, for any of the listeners out there, a bike of choice, they had one bike, what would be the bike and what would be the setup? So let's just go into the obviously the bike, the frame, the tire choice and gearing specifics.
Okay, so the bike I'll be lucky enough to ride at the Three Peaks would be, it's really strange because we're going to call it a gravel bike now, aren't we? You know.
Yeah.
Cross bike, gravel bike, cross bike, gravel bike. What's the difference?
So does Scott, just on that line then, does Scott have a specific gravel bike then?
Yes. We don't have a cross bike.
Oh, do you not?
No.
Oh, right. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So previously we've had a cross bike which was sharing the same frame as a gravel bike. And the gravel bike, what's the difference? Flare bars. The new Scott gravel bikes has got clearance for bigger tyres, but at Three Peaks not allowed them. So are you aware, Tom, of the? Do you want me to just outline the rules for Three Peaks?
For the people who don't know, yeah, just the basics.
Yeah. So to stop it becoming a mountain bike race, and to stop people using mountain bike frames and calling it a cross bike, the rules change over the years. You know, flat bars were allowed, then they weren't. Flat bars were allowed to 50 centimeters. Then I went and beat Rob Jebb on flat bars, and I've got to say, I see photographs of myself on flat bars, and it looks like I'm riding a hybrid. It's wrong, but it was actually really right for that moment. Then the new rules, and this is I'm going to quote these rules, but anyone listening must go on the website and check the rules.
Yeah.
But I believe for this year, the flare bars have gone.
Oh, really? Wow.
So it's a real tricky one, because what is a flare bar? And I understand why they've banned flare bars, because some people, if you take flare bars to an extreme, you could have your brake levers from a road cross bike lay that flat that you've basically turned it into a flat bar.
Yeah.
Almost. And that's what they need to stop, I guess. But what they've said, no flare bars. So our gravel frame in carbon fiber, because it's light, you know, we're talking 980 grams for a frame.
Wow.
So it's, you know, super lightweight, super strong. We need to respect the rules. So the rules are 35 mil tires as a maximum. So,
wow, I didn't appreciate it was that narrow. I thought it'd be up to like 40 or something.
Yeah, do check it, but I do believe it's 65 mil. And there's a new rule that says no flare bars and 44 centimetre maximum width.
Wow.
So the talking square, I suppose a 44 square road bar is as wide as you can go. That does present me with a problem personally, because I've got to now, I've this amazing gravel bike with the most incredible one-piece carbon bar. Can't ride it. A little bit frustrating because it's the faff, but we can sort it out. It's not, I can sort that out, no problem. Gearing. So forever, since SRAM came out with the XX1 group set and the 1x group set, there was this ability to have like a mullet setup. So you can have road setup at the front, mountain bike setup at the rear. And that, if money's no object and you want the best, one of the best things I did in 2019 was I rode SRAM Axis setup with a 1050 rear cassette and two-tooth chainring. So if you'd have asked me 15 years ago what's the best setup, it probably would have been a 2x system, so a road chain set with as big as sprockets at the back. Now we can, I always would say the golden rule would be you need at least 1-to-1. So if you're going to put a 42 tooth single ring up front, you need a 42 at the back, which is the old SRAM size. And they brought out the Eagle, so the Eagle now is a 50 or even a 52. And what's brilliant with that is do you run out of gears? If I've got a 42 on the front with the SRAM setup, you've got a 10 sprocket. So 42-10, I can't go any harder than that. And if I'm with somebody on a tailwind road section, they're not going to drop me with that gear. I might not be able to go through and give them the fastest, hardest turn. Well, that's a gift because I can't come through. So what I can do is have a drink and something a bite to eat and have a rest. So I would say 1-to-1 plus 1 is what you need, however that is as a gearing. And setup, you could if you haven't already cut your steerer too short and you've got a spacer, keep that spacer on there and have it as high up at the front as you can. What I have noticed is disc brakes have changed the game. So obviously all our bikes are disc brake now, and we used to put interrupter levers on bars and then take them all off. So we used to have to do a lot of work for Three Peaks just for one race. Now with disc brakes, I do an awful lot of descending. I would have said this was way too dangerous in the old days, but when you grab hold of a SRAM or even a Shimano lever, there's a big bulky head to the lever, and I actually descend most of the race on the tops. Because the brakes are so powerful now, you can do one finger brake on the tops. If you have got a shallow bar is really nice, so that you're not putting your neck into a really awkward position, because when you go off some drop-offs and you're kind of going down real steep stuff, one of the hardest things for Three Peaks 10 years ago, before we had disc brakes, before we had all this amazing kit, was the state of your neck for the neck. You're putting your neck in a position that it's really not happy with. So it's a lot. The modern day bikes are so much nicer now to race Three Peaks on.
I think one of the things you just mentioned there as well is the ability to descend on the tops, on the hoods, and like one finger braking. What that means is that you don't, like on the steeper descents or the descents where there is a lot of rocks and there's a risk of going over the bars, it means that your weight distribution can be a lot further back as well, as opposed to being too low at the front and having too much weight through the front wheel. So that for sure helps. One of the very obvious questions which a lot of people were asking was obviously with regards to tire choices. And I know back in the olden days, obviously, the Three Peaks was known as a race where you'd just have like the heaviest, most rigid tire on you could find. Whereas now with tubeless and things like that, I would assume, and tell me if I'm wrong, I would assume you run tubeless setups. what do you think if you had to choose one tire? And I appreciate it will massively vary depending on conditions on the day.
Yeah.
One tire to go for the race, kind of what would you tend to go for?
Schwalbe G1 or Schwalbe X1. So I know that's I'm giving you a brand there, so I'm not going to convert that across all the brands. But most people, if you Google X1, if you can get a 35mm X1, that would be a great tyre for your general rider. If you really are thinking you want to try and go as fast as you can, you may risk the G1, Schwalbe G1, and you're dead right with the tubeless setup. So if we go back 10, 15 years, we were tubeless mountain bike, but it hadn't really come across to CX racing. Tubs are still CX race. You know, I'm 50-50 now. I used to, when Jebby was winning, all those years when I came back to it, and I came second to him maybe 5 or 6 times, I was riding tubs. If you flat a tub, you can keep riding at a similar speed. It's not nice to your rim, but you can just keep riding. If you flat a tyre and tube setup, you've got a bit. You don't. Well, it's really difficult to ride and control it. Even riding a tubeless setup now, if you flat it, it still squirms about more than the tub would do. But what I did in 2019 is I got inserts from Cushcore, and me and Paul Oldham rode with Cushcore inserts in.
Right.
Now, the old days of tubs, this is a crazy pressure. I used to run 65 psi. I weigh 66 kilos, and I used to run 65 psi. I raced across at 17 psi, 20 maximum, 23. So really high pressure. Jebby used to ride. There was a sort of a hybrid tire from Schwalbe that had the sidewalls. They used to weigh a ton, and they didn't really have a lot of tread on. But they were the toughest tire for getting people round the Three Peaks. Were they Land Cruisers? I think they were called. Still available, I think, and they're a hybrid tire. They get people round. Super thick rubber sidewalls. The benefit of like a X1 and G1 is now we've got tubeless. If you put an insert in there, without inserts, I rode Three Peaks with 45 psi in at my weight, and then when I went with inserts, I ran as low as 32, 30 psi, which is such a low pressure for Three Peaks. And I tell you, in 2019, when you get to the top of Pen-y-ghent, you go up the final staircase. There's a new piece that's been in the last few years, and it's in grass, and you kind of join back in lower down, and you do this grass loop, and you can't see the rocks in the grass. So I hit something in 2019, and I am 100% sure without that Cushcore insert, that was a ripped tire, that was a puncher, and I couldn't believe that it stayed up. Wow. I also think that if I did have an issue with the Cushcore in, I can also ride it. It's more likely to stay on the rim and not come off as well. So
that's impressive. I think there's been some huge revelations with regards to and step ups in technology with regards to tire choice and selection and everything in recent years, and certainly making the race a little bit more forgiving as well as improving performances. Nick, I'm mindful of time, so what I'm going to do, I think we've covered all the main subjects that I wanted to go through, and each of these specific subjects we could talk at hours. Like just equipment, we could talk at length about all the different scenarios that present themselves and different setups that you could go for. But I want to cover a few of these questions, and if we go for what we'll do to make things a little bit more interesting and to keep it fairly time sensitive, is if we look for fairly short form answers with these. So a bit of quick fire Q&A to finish the podcast off, if that's okay. So these are all questions that have been asked from by my listeners or my Instagram followers. Question number 1, can you still clean Jacob's Ladder?
In sections, yes. In one, I might need an e-bike.
I had a quick Google search and a few videos to look at what it is, and it looks incredibly difficult in places. Just to keep that momentum going, and then also the length of it as well must be incredibly tiring. Question number 2: what is your favorite pre-race meal?
Porridge.
Porridge.
Yeah.
Standard. Yeah.
Yeah. It's made with jumbo oats, water. I'm not really a big. I've never drank. I'll drink milk and coffee, but I'm not. I don't enjoy milk really. So I'm aware that I then need to put some protein in it. So I then use some Greek low fat or zero fat yogurt. A few scoops of that, a few prunes, some seeds, some pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds, some fruit, whatever's going, blueberries, raspberries, strawberries, and anything else that I can find. So there's a bit of sugar in there, but I make the choice then, am I going to have more of a sugar hit and pour maple syrup on it, depending what I'm feeling like. But if I'm racing and I want to be ultimate, I love to add a really decent sized spoon of peanut butter.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And peanut butter melts in the porridge, and that for me is the perfect pre-race
go-to. Yeah. It's a good choice. How, and I, again, this is could be a lengthy response, but trying to keep it as short as you can. How do you approach the first road of Three Peaks Cross? How do you approach, like, mentally, how do you approach that first road section?
I would try to be as far forward as possible, just quite simply because I don't want to be on the front, but I don't want to be, if somebody else touches a wheel, the probability of somebody touching a wheel, the further back I am, the higher the probability. Simple as that. But also at the same time, I wouldn't want to make any dangerous maneuvers or physical maneuvers. So there's a neutralized car, and depending on what speed that car's going, it's really difficult. You want to be at the front, in the middle, and I've seen people falling into the hedge, going over the handlebars and catching bars. Everyone, it's a nervous moment. When you go into Horton and Ribblesdale, there's a bridge left, and that's really real tight bottleneck. So I just try and stay calm and not, just be alert and ready.
Have you got a specific Three Peaks cyclocross warm-up routine? I would assume due to the nature of that neutralized start, it's not too intense like a cross race. It's just a bit of riding around kind of thing.
Yeah, the only thing I'd say is you line up on your estimated time. So they'll kind of, I'm lucky enough to be able to go to the front, but they'll have some boards there and say, if you're 3.5 hours, 4 hours, where do you expect to be? There's a lot of standing around, and all I'd say is get your bike and go. If you go the opposite way to the start, so just ride up that hill there. There's lots of cars and lots of people, so have your wits about you. Make sure your bike's working. Make sure you haven't knocked your hanger. If you are using SRAM Axis, do charge your battery. Don't think I charged it 2 days ago and it's okay. If it's sat in your car and if it's been touching, that button's been touching something, it's likely that the battery's been drained. So I always travel to the race with the batteries on charge. Make sure your bike's working, and make sure you've got all the things that you need in your pockets or on your bike. So spare tubes, plugs, multi-tool, energy, whether it's gels or bars.
So where do you personally store that kind of stuff?
I always think it's mostly stored in a PowerLink. PowerLink is, if I'm going to swap bikes, I can't risk it not being on both bikes. So if I'm going to do PowerLink I have a little a little habit of getting some PVC tape, getting the power link, wrapping it, and putting it in behind in the back of the blade of the brake lever on the left side.
Oh yeah.
And that's on both bikes, so I can forget that. I fold the tab of PVC tape over so that I can tear it off. And the reason for that is I've got a tool on my multi-tool. I can break a chain, and then I can just put a new power link in, and I'm away if I snapped a chain, because that can happen. So if you have a multi-tool, if you want to be sure, carry it in your pocket. If you want your bike, it's really strange. It always psychologically, as long as you've got room in your pockets and it's not going to bounce out. Something about carry it on your body rather than on your bike, because then you're not picking it up and putting it back down again.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
Good point. I've just having a look through these questions now. We have answered quite a lot of them actually in the general conversation. So I'm going to single out just probably two more here. This is going away from Three Peaks. In last year's World Masters in Ipswich, you came second to a German rider. Have you raced him before in your younger years of racing? He looked like a powerhouse. Tell me about, have you raced him before? Do you know much about him?
Yeah, so Jens Vedler is called. In the 90s, he was a professional cyclocross racer, and we raced world pro cyclocross champs together.
Right.
And I can't tell you who beat who. I did 5 world championships, and then decided not to do any more because I needed to focus on mountain bike, and he stayed the cyclocross route. I think I may have raced him at the odd mountain bike race as well. And yeah, that day I raced when I turned. The category is really strange. You'd think it'd be 50-55, but it's actually 49 to 54. So when I was 49, I won it in Mull. I went out there and won the race, which was great. And with it being in Ipswich and Steve Grimwood and the organisers down in Ipswich, I really wanted to support it. On what I would say flat course isn't really my thing, but actually in the conditions it rained and it was amazing. Slippy corners, great fun. But unfortunately, it doesn't matter if you're defending world champ or who you are or what level you're at, it's random. And I was randomed when I won it in Belgium. I was randomed. There was 98 on the grid, and I was 94th.
Wow,
so it's dead last. And at Ipswich last year, I was slightly gutted to be on the next to back row. There was 108 on the start line, and I was gridded 98th or something. And Jens Vedler was gridded at maybe 50th or 48th. And as I put a really deep effort in to get to the front, he'd put in an effort to get to the front and go off the front, and he got maybe 25 seconds. And I spent the whole race trying to chase him down. And it's, he won and he deserved it that day. So I'll be back in Ipswich if whoever was asking the question. I'm in the last year in the category, but I'll be there giving it a go in Ipswich in December.
And in a few words off the back of that, how are you feeling going into this season?
Yeah, we're still. It's really funny. We've finished the cross-country mountain bike season. I'm just about to enter into a bit of a marathon block. I'll be honest with you, just now I'm actually quite tired I've done a lot of races, won 5 nationals, national champs, just done Ardrock, which was great fun. There's been a lot of travelling. I worked for UCI at the Lenzerheide World Cup in the marketing. I was in charge of all the marketing there. And it's been a busy season, a great season. We've got, from a work perspective, we've got a really exciting 2023 coming with some amazing products. And I'm looking forward to this winter testing out some new options with cyclocross. And yeah, looking forward to the up and coming cross season. So yeah,
that's mega.
Three Peaks is just a step towards it.
Yeah, absolutely. Nick, the last question I was going to ask is if there was one piece of advice that you'd give to anybody in the next few weeks, training wise, what would that be? But I think we already covered that with regards to stretching the calves off and getting used to that that kind of steep hill walking. So with regards to this podcast, I am going to wrap it up there. I'm very mindful of time, not only from your perspective, but also the listener's perspective. And also, to be brutally honest, I've got to pick my daughter up from nursery in about 10 minutes. So, but Nick, I really, really, really appreciate you talking to us today. It's been fantastic. And like I say, I mean, we've been talking for an hour and 40 minutes now, and it seems to have flown by, because each of these subject areas, you know, we could have waffled on for hours on end. And it'd be great to